Commander Veltar stood at the large window of Kepler Station and looked out at the stars. His blue skin was pale with worry, and his long fingers shook as he held his cup of bitter tea. Outside in the dark space, he could see the enemy ships. 12 large warships floated there like hungry wolves waiting to attack. The Zephyrian Empire had been blocking their small space station for 6 long months. Every day, the enemy ships got a little closer. Every day, the people on Kepler Station got more scared. They were running out of food, running out of hope, and running out of time. Veltar was not a soldier by choice. Before the war, he had been a teacher on the planet Altair Prime. He taught young children about the stars and the peaceful ways of his people. But that was before the Zephyrians came with their big ships and plasma guns. That was before his whole world burned. 3 years ago, the Zephyrians had attacked Altair Prime without warning. They said the Altarians were weak and did not deserve their beautiful planet. The attack lasted only 2 days. Millions of Altarians died. Those who lived were forced to run to places like Kepler Station. Now even this small place was not safe. "Commander," a voice called behind him. Veltar turned to see Lieutenant Kexra walking toward him. She was young, maybe 25 Earth years old. Her green eyes showed the same fear that everyone felt. "What is it, Lieutenant?" Veltar asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad news. "The food stores are getting very low, sir. We have maybe 3 weeks left if we cut everyone's meals in half. The water recyclers are breaking down too. Chief Engineer Moxon says he can fix them, but he needs parts we don't have." Veltar closed his eyes. 3,000 people lived on Kepler Station. Most were families with young children, old people who could not fight, people who just wanted to live in peace. "And the shields?" he asked. "Holding at 60% power, sir. But the generators are old. Very old. If the Zephyrians attack with full force..." Kexra did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Veltar walked to the central command area of the station. It was a small room with old computers and flickering screens. The station had been built 50 years ago as a mining post. It was never meant to be a home for so many people or to fight a war. "Show me the enemy positions," he said. The main screen lit up with a map of the solar system. 12 red dots showed where the Zephyrian ships waited. 3 big battle cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 3 support ships. Against them, Kepler Station had 6 small fighter ships and some old defense guns that barely worked. "Sir," said Chief Engineer Moxon from his station. He was an older Altarian with gray skin and tired eyes. "I've been looking at our weapons. The main defense grid can maybe stop 1 or 2 ships, but not a full attack. And our fighters, they're brave pilots, but their ships are too old and too slow." Veltar knew this already, but hearing it said out loud made it real, made it final. "What about the distress signal?" he asked. "Still broadcasting on all emergency channels, sir," said Communications Officer Texro. "We've been sending it for 4 months now. The signal has reached at least 20 star systems. But..." He stopped talking and looked at the floor. "But no one is coming," Veltar finished for him. "No one wants to fight the Zephyrian Empire for a small mining station full of refugees." The truth hurt, but it was still the truth. The galaxy was a big place, and most species only cared about themselves. The Altarians had always been peaceful. They had no strong allies, no powerful friends who would risk their own ships to save them. Suddenly, alarms began to sound throughout the station. Red lights flashed, and the computer voice announced, "Alert! Alert! Enemy ships are moving. All defense teams to battle stations." On the main screen, 3 of the red dots began to move. The biggest Zephyrian ships were coming toward Kepler Station. "They're tired of waiting," Veltar said quietly. "They're going to attack." Lieutenant Kexra ran to her station and began working the controls. "Sir, the lead ship is the Crimson Talon. It's their flagship. Sensors show they're charging their main weapons." Veltar looked around the command room at his people. They were scared, but they were ready to fight. These were not soldiers, but they would defend their home and their families as best they could. "All citizens of Kepler Station," Veltar said, into the station-wide communication system. His voice was calm and strong, even though his heart was beating fast. "This is Commander Veltar. The enemy is attacking. All people not needed for defense should go to the lower levels now. Find the emergency shelters and stay there until the fighting is over. Defense teams, go to your positions. Today we show these invaders that Altarians do not give up without a fight. People all over the station began to move. Families gathered their children and ran to the safe areas deep inside the station. The few soldiers they had picked up their weapons and went to the gun positions. Engineers worked to give the shields more power. Through the big window, Veltar could see the 3 enemy ships getting closer. They were huge, each one 10 times bigger than anything Kepler Station had. Their dark red hulls looked like drops of blood against the stars. First plasma bolts incoming, reported Kexra. The station shook as the enemy weapons hit their shields. The lights flickered, and somewhere in the distance, an alarm was screaming about damage to Section C. Shields down to 40%, called out Moxon. Sir, we can't take many more hits like that. Veltar watched the enemy ships come closer. In a few minutes, they would be close enough to use their biggest guns. When that happened, Kepler Station would die, and 3,000 innocent people would die with it. But he would not surrender. He would not let his people become slaves to the Zephyrian Empire. If they were going to die, they would die as free Altarians. All weapons, fire when ready, he ordered. The station's old defense guns came to life, sending beams of energy toward the attacking ships. The shots were weak and most missed their targets, but it felt good to fight back. The Zephyrians answered with another attack, this one stronger than the first. The station shook harder, and more alarms began to sound. Veltar stood in the command center and watched his home being destroyed piece by piece. He thought about the distress signal still going out to the stars, still asking for help that would never come. They thought no help would come. He whispered to himself, watching the enemy ships prepare for the killing blow. The battle had been going on for 4 hours. Kepler Station was dying slowly, piece by piece. The shields that protected the station were almost gone. Sparks flew from broken computers, and smoke filled the air in many parts of the station. Commander. Veltar stood in the command center, his blue uniform torn and dirty. A cut on his forehead bled down his face, but he did not care. Around him, his people worked desperately to keep the station alive just a little longer. Sir, shields are at 12%, called Chief Engineer Moxon. His voice was tired and scared. The generators can't take much more. One more big hit and we lose everything. Through the big window, Veltar could see the enemy ships moving closer. The largest one, the Crimson Talon, was almost close enough to use its biggest guns. Those weapons could destroy the entire station with one shot. Section 7 has been hit, reported Lieutenant Kexra. The hull is broken there. We had to close the emergency doors and evacuate everyone. Casualties? Veltar asked, though he did not want to know the answer. 43 people hurt, sir. 7 dead. Veltar closed his eyes for a moment. Those were not just numbers. They were people he knew. Teachers, workers, children, people who had already lost everything once when their planet was destroyed. Our fighters, he asked. Only 2 left, sir. They're trying to draw the enemy fire away from the station, but their weapons can't hurt those big ships. On the main screen, Veltar could see the 2 small Altarian fighters dancing around the huge enemy battlecruiser. They were so small, compared to the Zephyrian ship, like tiny birds fighting a giant monster. But they kept fighting anyway. The Crimson Talon stopped moving and turned its front toward Kepler Station. Along its hull, huge gun ports began to open. The main plasma cannons were getting ready to fire. This is it, whispered Communications Officer Texro. They're going to finish us. The enemy ship's weapons began to glow with bright red energy. In a few seconds, those guns would fire, and Kepler Station would be nothing but floating pieces of metal and dead bodies. Veltar stood up straight and looked at his people. It has been an honor to serve with all of you, he said quietly. Then, something impossible happened. The space around Kepler Station suddenly filled with bright blue light. Reality seemed to tear open like someone was cutting through a piece of cloth. The light got brighter and brighter until everyone had to cover their eyes. When the light faded, there was a new ship in space near the station. Veltar stared at it in amazement. The ship was huge, almost as big as the Crimson Talon, but it looked completely different. Where the Zephyrian ships were round and smooth, this one was angular and sharp. Its hull was dark gray, and it was covered with weapon mounts and sensor arrays. "What is that thing?" asked Lieutenant Kexra in a whisper. Before anyone could answer, the strange ship opened fire. Bright beams of energy shot out from the newcomers' weapons. They hit the Crimson Talon's shields with incredible force. The Zephyrian ship's shields, which had seemed so strong, collapsed immediately. More energy beams hit the enemy battlecruiser's hull, and explosions began to ripple along its surface. "Impossible," breathed Chief Engineer Moxon. "No ship can punch through Zephyrian shields that easily." The mysterious ship's weapons kept firing. Each shot was perfectly aimed, hitting critical systems on the Crimson Talon. The enemy battlecruiser's engines started to smoke, and its weapon systems went dark. Then a voice came through the station's communication system. It was speaking perfect Altarian, but the accent was strange. "Kepler Station, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the UES Intrepid, Earth Defense Fleet. We received your distress call. Sorry we're late to the party, but we brought some friends." As if the captain's words had magic power, more ships began to appear in space around the station. One by one, they came out of hyperspace in flashes of blue light. Sleek destroyers and fast frigates took positions around the Zephyrian fleet. Veltar counted them quickly. 12 new ships had appeared, and they were already moving into attack formation. But these were not like any ships he had ever seen before. "Earth Defense Fleet?" repeated Texro. "Are those humans?" Veltar had heard of humans before. They were a young race that had only made contact with the galaxy a few years ago. Most people said they were primitive and weak, barely able to travel between stars. But the ships outside did not look primitive at all. "UES Intrepid, this is Commander Veltar of Kepler Station," he said into his communicator. We didn't think anyone was coming. We've been broadcasting for months." "Well, Commander, it takes a while to cross half the galaxy. But Earth doesn't. Leave distress calls unanswered. We're here now, and we're going to get you folks out of this mess." On the main screen, Veltar watched the human ships spread out around the Zephyrian fleet. The enemy ships, which had seemed so confident just minutes before, suddenly looked uncertain. They were no longer dealing with helpless refugees in an old mining station. The largest Zephyrian ship, a battlecruiser called the Death's Edge, opened fire on the human fleet. Plasma bolts and missiles filled space as the enemy tried to destroy the newcomers. But the human ships moved like nothing Veltar had ever seen. Instead of staying in neat formations like most space fleets, they scattered in all directions. One destroyer rolled upside down and flew under the Death's Edge, firing at its weak spots. A frigate used its speed to circle around behind two Zephyrian ships, confusing their targeting systems. "Look at how they fight," said Lieutenant Kextra with wonder in her voice. "They're not following any tactics I've ever seen." "Maybe that's why they're winning," replied Moxon. The human ship called Intrepid moved toward the damaged Crimson Talon. Its weapons fired again, and this time they aimed at the enemy ship's bridge. The shot was perfect, and the Zephyrian flagship's command center exploded in a ball of fire. "This is Captain Morrison to all Zephyrian vessels," came the human's voice over the communication channels. "You have attacked civilians and refugees. That doesn't sit well with us. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system, or we'll send you home in pieces." The Zephyrian response came quickly. High Admiral Sektar's face appeared on screens throughout the system. The reptilian alien's yellow eyes burned with anger. "Human ship, you have no authority here. This system belongs to the Zephyrian Empire. Leave now or be destroyed." Captain Morrison's voice came back, calm and steady. "Admiral, let me explain something to you. Those people on that station sent out a call for help. Earth heard that call. And when Earth hears someone asking for help, we come running. Every time. No matter how far. No matter how dangerous. You are outnumbered, human. My fleet will crush you. Maybe. But you'll have to go through us to hurt those people. And I promise you, Admiral, that's going to cost you more than you want to pay." Veltar listened to this exchange with growing amazement. The humans were outnumbered, but they did not seem scared at all. They spoke as if protecting strangers was the most natural thing in the galaxy. "Sir," said Texro excitedly, "I'm picking up more hyperspace signatures. Something big is coming." On the edge of the system, space began to glow with blue light again. More ships were arriving, but these were not human vessels. A massive Zephyrian battle fleet was coming out of hyperspace. 20 more ships, including several huge dreadnoughts. "Human ship." Admiral Sektar's voice came over the communication system again. "Now you see. You are trapped. Surrender now, and I might let some of you live." But Captain Morrison just laughed. It was a sound full of confidence in something else, something that made Veltar think these humans were not like any other species in the galaxy. "Admiral, you just made a big mistake. You brought more targets." Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Intrepid, watching the tactical screens that showed the battle around Kepler Station. He was 45 years old, with gray hair and scars on his hands from old fights. His crew worked around him with calm efficiency, even though they were facing impossible odds. "Lieutenant Carter, what do we have?" Morrison asked his weapons officer. 3 damaged Zephyrian battle cruisers in close range, sir. 20 more ships coming in from the system edge, including 4 dreadnoughts. Long-range sensors show they'll be here in 15 minutes. Lieutenant Amy Carter was young, maybe 28, but she had fought in 5 major battles. Her fingers moved quickly over the targeting controls. "And our forces?" 12 ships, sir. The destroyer Destiny and frigate Valiant are in good position. The rest of the squadron is spread around the system. Commander Lisa Park stepped up beside Morrison's command chair. She was his second in command, a tough woman who had grown up on the mining colonies of the Outer Rim. "Sir, the numbers don't look good. Even with our tech advantage, 24 to 12 is not great odds." Morrison nodded. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors. Their ships were well built and their crews were experienced. Most species would retreat when facing such odds, but humans were not most species. "Signal the fleet," Morrison said. "Execute battle plan Delta 7. Let's show these lizards something they've never seen before." The human ships immediately began to move, but not in any way the Zephyrians expected. Instead of forming defensive lines or staying in tight groups, the human vessels scattered in all directions. Each ship became a lone predator, moving fast and striking hard. The destroyer UES Destiny rolled underneath the damaged Crimson Talon, its point defense guns systematically destroying the battlecruiser's fighter bays. Meanwhile, the frigate UES Valiant used its superior speed to dart between 2 Zephyrian ships, drawing their fire while the larger human ships positioned for devastating attacks. "What are they doing?" asked Admiral Sektar from his flagship. His tactical officer stared at the screens in confusion. "I don't know, sir. They've abandoned all formation. Each ship is acting independently. It's chaos." But it was not chaos. It was something the Zephyrians had never encountered before: human pack tactics. On Earth, humans had spent thousands of years fighting wars against other humans. They had learned to be unpredictable, to strike where the enemy was weak, to make their opponents react instead of act. While other species developed rigid military doctrines, humans learned to adapt and improvise. "Target the enemy flagship," Morrison ordered. "All weapons, full power." The Intrepid's main guns opened fire. Streams of superheated plasma and railgun slugs hammered into the Zephyrian command ship. The enemy's shields held, but just barely. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Zephyrian fleet," reported Communications Officer Ben Hayes. "They're demanding our surrender." "Put them through." Admiral Sektar's reptilian face appeared on the main screen. His yellow eyes showed anger and frustration. "Human captain, your tactics are dishonorable. Stand and fight like warriors." Morrison almost smiled. "Admiral, let me explain something about humans. We don't fight for honor. We don't fight for glory. We fight to win. And we fight to protect people who need protecting. You cannot win against superior numbers. Maybe not, but we'll hurt you badly trying. Tell me, Admiral, how many ships are you willing to lose to destroy one refugee station? How many of your people are you willing to sacrifice for the sake of your empire's pride?" Sektar's expression changed slightly. Morrison could see he was thinking about the question. The Zephyrian way of war was about overwhelming force and intimidation. They were not used to enemies who asked difficult questions. "You have no choice but to surrender," Sektar said, but his voice was not as confident as before. "Actually, Admiral, I do have a choice. I can keep fighting until your reinforcements get here, and then I can keep fighting some more. See, my orders are simple. Protect the people on that station. Everything else is just details." The transmission ended and Morrison turned to his crew. "Status report. 2 Zephyrian battlecruisers are heavily damaged," reported Carter. "But their reinforcements will be here in 10 minutes. Sir, we're going to be outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Then we better make these next 10 minutes count. Signal all ships. Pattern Omega. Time to get creative." The human fleet suddenly changed tactics again. Instead of attacking the enemy ships, they began targeting specific systems. The Destiny hit the engines of a Zephyrian destroyer, leaving it floating dead in space. The Valiant knocked out the communications array on a cruiser, cutting it off from the rest of the fleet. "What are they doing now?" Admiral Sektar demanded. "They're not trying to destroy our ships, sir. They're disabling them, making them useless without killing the crews." Sektar stared at the tactical display. In all his years of fighting, he had never seen an enemy show such restraint. Most species either ran away or fought to the death. These humans seemed to be doing something else entirely. On Kepler Station, Commander Veltar watched the battle in amazement. "They're not fighting like any military force I've ever seen," he said to Lieutenant Kexra. "Look at that frigate," she replied, pointing at the screen. "It just took out the weapons on that destroyer but left the life support systems alone. The crew is alive, but the ship can't fight anymore. Why would they do that?" "Maybe," said Chief Engineer Moxon thoughtfully, "they don't want to kill people unless they have to." The idea was strange to most species in the galaxy. War was war. Enemies were enemies. But the humans seemed to see things differently. "Captain," Carter called out urgently, "the Zephyrian reinforcements are coming out of hyperspace now." Morrison watched as 20 new ships appeared at the edge of the system. 4 massive dreadnoughts, each one bigger than anything in the human fleet. 10 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers. "Well," he said calmly, "this is about to get interesting." "Sir," Commander Park said quietly, "maybe we should consider retreat. We've done what we can." Morrison looked at her, then at the image of Kepler Station on his screen. 3,000 refugees who had asked for help. 3,000 people who had been abandoned by everyone else in the galaxy. "Lisa, did you hear that distress call they were broadcasting?" "Yes, sir. Did it say, 'Please help us if it's convenient,' or 'Please help us unless the odds are bad'?" Park smiled slightly. "It just said, 'Please help us, sir.'" "Then that's what we're going to do. Mr. Hayes, open a channel to Kepler Station." Commander Veltar's face appeared on the screen. The Altarian looked tired and scared, but also hopeful. "Commander," Morrison said, "we're about to get very busy here. But I want you to know something. Earth keeps its promises. We're not leaving." "Captain Morrison," Veltar replied, "you don't have to die for us. You've already done more than anyone else in the galaxy was willing to do. Commander, let me tell you about humans. When we say we'll help, we mean it. When we say we'll protect you, we mean it. And when we say we're not leaving, we definitely mean it." The first shots from the Zephyrian reinforcements lit up space around the human fleet. The battle was about to begin in earnest. The space around Kepler Station had become a graveyard of twisted metal and burning ships. For 30 minutes, the human fleet had fought against impossible odds, their 12 ships dancing between the massive Zephyrian force like wolves fighting bears. Admiral Sektar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator, watching his tactical displays with growing frustration. His fleet had every advantage: better numbers, bigger ships, more firepower. But somehow the humans kept fighting. "Status report," he demanded from his tactical officer. "We have lost 3 destroyers and 2 cruisers, Admiral. The humans have disabled 6 more ships. Their tactics are unusual. They seem to target our engines and weapons, but they avoid hitting life support systems. What about their losses?" 2 human destroyers have been damaged, but none destroyed," Sir, they fight like nothing we have ever encountered. They seem to know exactly where our weak points are. Sektar's clawed hands gripped his command throne. In 30 years of conquest across the galaxy, no enemy had ever frustrated him like this. The humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and tactical genius that made no sense. On the UES Intrepid, Captain Morrison studied the battle, display with grim satisfaction. His fleet was holding, but just barely. Every ship had taken damage, and they were running low on ammunition for their main weapons. "Captain, priority message from Earth Command," announced Communications Officer Hayes. Morrison activated his personal communicator. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice came through, urgent and concerned. "Jake, this is Kate. Our long-range sensors show a second Zephyrian fleet moving toward your position. 40 ships, including battle carriers. They'll reach you in 1 hour." "Understood, Admiral. What are my orders?" "Jake, you've done enough. Get our people out of there." Morrison looked at the image of Kepler Station on his screen. He could see the damaged sections, the emergency lights flashing, 3,000 refugees who had nowhere else to go. "Admiral, request permission to continue the mission." "Jake, 60 ships against 12 is suicide. Even you can't win those odds." "Maybe. Not, ma'am, but I can try." There was a long pause, then Admiral Sullivan's voice came back softer. "Jake, you know I can't order you to throw away your ships and crews." "You're not ordering me, Admiral. I'm volunteering." Morrison cut the transmission and turned to his crew. They had all heard the conversation. Lieutenant Carter looked up from her weapons console. "Sir, what are your orders?" Morrison looked around the bridge at his people. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes. But they were also determined. They had come here to save lives, and they were not going to abandon that mission now. "We're staying," he said simply. "Any objections?" There were none. "Mr. Hayes, open a channel to the Zephyrian flagship." Admiral Sektar's face appeared on the main screen. The reptilian commander looked tired and angry. "Human captain, this ends now. Surrender your ships and I will allow you to evacuate the station." "Admiral, I have a counteroffer. You withdraw your fleet now, and I won't have to embarrass you." "In front of your superiors." Sektar's yellow eyes flared with rage. "You are outnumbered 5-1, human. How can you possibly threaten me?" Morrison smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral, let me show you something about human warfare. Mr. Carter, target the Dominator's engines. Full power." "Sir, collision course set," reported the helmsman, Ensign Steve Turner. Impact. In 60 seconds. On every ship in both fleets, alarms began to sound. The massive human dreadnought was accelerating directly toward the Zephyrian flagship, its weapons blazing. "They're going to ram us," Sektar's tactical officer reported unnecessarily. "Admiral, they show no signs of changing course." For the first time in his military career, Admiral Sektar felt something he had never experienced before. Genuine fear. Not fear of death, but fear of an enemy so unpredictable that they would destroy themselves just to take him with them. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. But the Dominator was too big and too slow to avoid the charging human ship. The Intrepid came closer and closer, its railguns and plasma cannons tearing through the Zephyrian flagship's shields. At the last possible moment when collision seemed certain, the human ship's engines roared to life, bringing it to a stop just meters from the enemy bridge. The psychological impact was devastating. Across the Zephyrian fleet, commanders stared, in shock at the human dreadnought floating next to their flagship. The humans had been willing to die, not for territory, not for resources, but for strangers they had never met. "This is Captain Morrison to all Zephyrian vessels," came the transmission across all frequencies. "I want you to understand something. We didn't come here for conquest. We didn't come here for glory. We came here because people asked for help, and Earth always answers." Admiral Sektar stared at the human ship through his viewport. He could see the damage it had taken, the scorch marks on its hull, but it was still there, still fighting. "You are insane," he whispered into his communicator. "Maybe, Admiral, but we're the kind of insane that travels across half the galaxy to save people we've never met. What kind of insane are you?" Before Sektar could answer, his communications officer spoke up urgently. Sir, we're receiving reports from across the fleet. 7 ships are requesting permission to withdraw. Crew morale is compromised. What do you mean, compromised? Sir, the crews are questioning the wisdom of continuing this battle. They're saying the humans fight like demons, and that maybe it's not worth dying to destroy a refugee station. Sektar looked around his bridge. His own officers were avoiding his eyes. The confidence and aggression that had carried them through years of conquest was gone, replaced by doubt and fear. On Kepler Station, Commander Veltar watched the impossible scene outside. The human ship was so close to the enemy flagship that they were almost touching, but somehow neither was firing. "What are they doing?" asked Lieutenant Kexera. "I think," said Chief Engineer Moxon slowly, "they're having a conversation about whether this fight is worth it. And what do you think the answer will be?" Moxon watched as several Zephyrian ships began to move away from the battle area. "I think the Zephyrians are starting to realize that humans don't fight the same way as everyone else. Most species fight until they win or until they lose. Humans fight until they accomplish their mission, no matter what it costs." "Captain Morrison," came Admiral Sektar's voice over the communication system, "you have made your point. What are your terms?" Morrison's reply was simple and direct. "You leave. We stay. The people on that station get to live in peace, that's it. And if I refuse, then we keep fighting, Admiral. And when your reinforcements get here, we fight them too. And when more ships come after that, we fight those as well. See, the thing about humans is we're really stubborn, especially when innocent people are counting on us." There was a long pause. Then Admiral Sektar's voice came back, quieter than before. "The Zephyrian fleet will withdraw from this system. But know this, human. This is not over." "Admiral," Morrison replied, "if you ever threaten innocent people again, we'll be there. That's a promise." The Zephyrian fleet began to withdraw from the Kepler system, their ships limping away into hyperspace one by one. Admiral Sektar's flagship, the Dominator, was the last to leave. Its hull was scarred from the battle, and several of its weapon systems were completely destroyed. As the enemy ships disappeared into the darkness between stars, Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Intrepid and watched them go. His crew was tired but victorious. They had done the impossible, faced overwhelming odds, and won through sheer determination. "Signal from Kepler Station, sir," reported Communications Officer Hayes. Commander Veltar appeared on the main screen. The Altarian commander's blue face was wet with tears of gratitude. Behind him, his crew was cheering and embracing each other. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said, his voice shaking with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved 3,000 lives today. You saved my people. Commander, you don't need to thank us, that's what humans do. Someone calls for help, we come running. But why? You didn't know us. We had nothing to offer you in return. Why would you risk everything for strangers?" Morrison thought about the question for a moment. It was something that many species asked about humans, and the answer was never simple. "Commander, let me tell you a story. A long time ago on Earth, there was a man walking by a river. He heard someone screaming for help. A child had fallen into the water and was drowning. Now this man couldn't swim very well, and the river was dangerous. He had every reason to just walk away and find someone else to help." Veltar listened intently, along with his crew and everyone else who was monitoring the communication. "But you know what he did. He jumped into that river anyway. He saved that child, even though it meant risking his own life." Later, people asked him why he did it. You know what he said? What did he say, Captain? He said, "Because someone needed help, and I was there." That's the human way, Commander. We don't help people because we expect something back. We help because it's the right thing to do. 6 months later, the story of the Battle of Kepler Station had spread to every corner of known space. In the taverns of distant worlds, traders and travelers told the tale of how a human fleet had appeared from nowhere to save a station full of refugees. The story grew with each telling. Some said the humans fought off 1,000 ships. Others claimed they destroyed an entire Zephyrian armada. But the core truth remained the same. When innocent people had called for help, the humans had answered. Commander Veltar now serving as Altarian ambassador to Earth, stood in the Great Assembly, hall of the Terran Senate. Around him sat representatives from dozens of worlds, all listening as he addressed the human government. "Honored senators," he began, "my people have an old saying, 'In the darkest night, even the smallest star can guide you home.' For months, we broadcast our distress call into the void, hoping someone would hear us, hoping someone would care." He paused, looking around the chamber at the human faces watching him. Most species in this galaxy care only for themselves. They build walls around their territories and ignore the suffering of others. When we asked for help, 93 different governments told us they could not get involved. They said it was not their problem. Veltar's voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. But Earth said something different. Earth said, "We're coming." And you did. You traveled across half the galaxy to save people you had never met. You risked your ships and your lives for refugees who had nothing to offer you in return. The chamber was completely silent. Even the most experienced politicians were moved by the Altarian's words. "You want to know why humans are different? I will tell you. Most species see the universe as a cold, dangerous place where only the strong survive. But humans see it as a place where the strong have a duty to protect the weak. You don't fight for conquest. You fight for justice. You don't help others because you have to. You help because you choose to." In the months that followed, something unprecedented began to happen across the galaxy. Other species started to change how they thought about interstellar relations. The Altarian refugees were given new homes on peaceful worlds. Trade routes that had been closed for years opened up, as governments decided cooperation was better than isolation. But the most important change happened in the dark corners of space, where the strong preyed upon the weak. Pirates and slavers who had once operated with impunity began to look over their shoulders. Word had spread that there was a new power in the galaxy, one that would travel any distance to stop injustice. On a small trading station near the Galactic Rim, a group of slavers was preparing to attack a refugee convoy. Their leader, a brutish alien named Gorth, was outlining the attack plan when one of his subordinates spoke up nervously. "Boss, what if the humans come?" Gorth laughed. "The humans are on the other side of the galaxy. They'll never even hear about this." "But boss, they heard about Kepler Station. They always seem to hear when people need help." The laughter died in Gorth's throat. He looked around at his crew and saw the same uncertainty in their eyes. The legend of the humans had spread even to the criminal underworld. "The humans won't come," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. 3 days later, when Gorth's pirates attacked the refugee convoy, a human patrol fleet happened to be passing through the system. The battle lasted exactly 7 minutes. The pirates' ships were disabled, their crews captured, and the refugees continued safely to their destination. As news of this latest rescue spread, a new phrase began to appear in the languages of dozens of species across the galaxy. Whenever people faced impossible odds, whenever the innocent were threatened by the strong, they would whisper the same words: "Help will come. The humans always come." And in the depths of space, on space stations and colony worlds, in refugee camps and mining outposts, those words became more than just hope. They became truth. The legend of Kepler Station had changed everything. For the first time in galactic history, there was a species that fought not for empire or profit, but for principle. A species that would cross any distance and face any odds to answer a call for help. Captain Morrison, now promoted to admiral, stood on the bridge of his new flagship and read the latest intelligence reports. 17 rescue missions completed in the last month, pirates driven from 6 systems, 3 slave markets shut down permanently. "Admiral," his aide said, "there's another distress call coming in. Long range. It's from the Vega sector." Morrison smiled. "Set course for Vega. Maximum speed." As the human fleet jumped to hyperspace, racing toward another desperate situation, the legend continued to grow. Across the galaxy, species that had never heard of Earth began to learn a new truth. When evil seemed triumphant and hope appeared, lost when the darkness pressed in and no help seemed possible, there was always one last chance. Somewhere in the void, human ships were already on their way,